Star Wars or Star Trek? One of the most iconic sci-fi franchises, period. Sorry, Doctor Who. Star Wars and Star Trek have probably the most whiniest fan base I've probably seen in fiction, honestly. But Star Trek started first in the 60s, while Star Wars was in the 70s, and both were groundbreaking at the time for both movies and TV shows, because Star Trek was a TV show in the 60s and Star Wars was a groundbreaking movie in the 70s. And which one do I think is better? Honestly, I like both, but Star Wars is superior in probably every way, because the characters I feel are more fleshed out. Unpopular opinion, but I actually like Star Trek's Next Generation more than the original Star Trek, because some of the pacing is so slow and Star Trek. I hate to say that, but sometimes it was like, okay, are they going to do anything? They're just talking. They're on their computer sometimes. But Star Wars, most of the time, it's nonstop action. You have great music. Both, like Star Trek has great music too. Don't get me wrong. They have the iconic theme song, the Next Generation's theme, Kurt fighting against that monster's theme, Spock versus Captain Kirk's fight. I mean, the characters in Star Wars, I feel are more fleshed out. But in recent years, I feel like Star Trek has probably gotten better with the fan base, I think, compared to Star Wars, where the fans on the Star Wars side have been complaining every single time since the prequels came out. And I honestly don't think the Star Wars movies are bad. It's just not, it's just hard to top the originals. And unpopular opinion, I actually like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. I've only seen 4 movies in the actual theater comparison to, I've seen every single Star Wars movie re-released though of all the Star Wars movies. But I feel like the best Star Trek movie is the second one, while the best Star Wars movie is technically the original second one too. But I think the first Star Wars alone is better than the entire movie franchise of the Star Trek when they did the movies. Like some of the visual effects, I don't know. I know for the time that's what they had for Star Trek, but I feel like the special effects didn't get that much better much even in later years. But I feel like the writing was pretty good, but there are consistent plot holes and stuff that's confusing now, that you don't know where to start on Star Trek. And it's kind of almost like the same with Star Wars at this point, where the continuity errors and a lot of those plot holes in there. But overall, both are really iconic. And I have to say, like, Star Trek, I would say their fan base is pretty tamed compared to Star Wars fans. Unfortunately, I know there's some diehard Star Trek fans that are probably raging right now, but Star Wars fans are probably one of the most whiniest people. And I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I like both, like I said. More of a Star Wars guy, but Star Trek, they're a lot more calm. The fans, and like I said, like the movies for Star Trek are either they're all right or they're just they could have been better. Like, I remember seeing the first one I saw in theaters was the Nemesis movie, which was kind of disappointing. Well, Star Wars has been pretty much consistently good up until a lot of people will say the prequels, but I enjoy the prequels for what they are. I even enjoyed the sequel trilogy, even the the Han Solo movie at Rogue One. I haven't finished all the TV shows, but overall they're pretty much enjoyable if you don't count the Christmas special that we don't talk about the Star Wars Christmas special. But and like the acting for Star Wars is better. Sometimes the characters are really overreacting and Star Trek, and it's kind of comical, and maybe it's probably part of the charm of Star Trek is some of the stuff is so goofy, but sometimes they're trying to take it so seriously that you can't hate it. You just love it. You know, Star Trek is one of those shows and movie series that is like that. Star Wars is more, I would say, taken more serious, I guess. But there are goofy moments in the prequels and even the original and the sequel, and some very horrible dialogue that was in there in the prequels and the sequel trilogies. There's some bad dialogue in the original Star Trek too, but not as memorable as some of the prequel ones. But like I said, the characters in Star Wars I feel are better. Like, you know who Darth Vader is, you know who Luke is, you know Yoda, R2. There's like a whole list of people. Han Solo, there's like a whole list. I mean, you could do that with some Star Trek characters. I could probably name like 25 characters in comparison to like 100 Star Wars characters that you could think of. And all the, even like the side characters for Star Wars have some crazy backstory, or they have some crazy book. And like, I would probably say the Star Trek books are probably really good. I haven't read too many of them, but I'm sure that they're really good too. A lot of the Star Wars books are really good. I had this one that came out in the 90s that was really good. It was kind of like a trilogy, and I was kind of wishing that that was more of the sequel trilogy than what we got, but I still like the sequel trilogy. Like, I can name Star Trek characters, but there's like so many characters. I know there's backstories. There's a lot of lore in Star Trek. A lot of characters returning and coming back and all that. And same thing with Star Wars. They've brought back Boba Fett, which they should have just left him dead, but whatever. But overall, yeah, I think Star Wars is clearly better to me. I know some fans will probably say Star Trek, Star Wars, Star Trek, Star Wars, but probably 55% will say Star Wars, I think. Don't get me wrong, Star Trek is good, but I feel like Star Wars is better.